you know, we still need the stories, whether we read modern novels or not. It's like, you know, we need that connection, whether it's with our elders or with our kids. You know, we pass these stories on as something precious. For me personally, it's probably just the unknown, you know. I've always been drawn more to the unknown and whatever the beyond of normal life. So I would actually go out and look for these. You know, we would go to haunted houses. We would go to haunted areas of the cities, see what was going on, you know. Yeah, now whatever that comes from, I don't know, but it kept life interesting.
It was almost like an escape.
Definitely an escape. Family life was not a happy life, so that was an escape. Oh, definitely.
Hey, welcome to the Floaties for Krakens podcast. I am your host, Camille Maria Costa, and it is a brilliant day to be monstrous. Hi, Cuttlefish. Welcome back to season 3, episode 3 of Floaties for Krakens. Yay! Happy September! Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for, gosh, I feel like I can't get through one introduction without saying how excited I am. I feel like it's fine. I just get really thrilled about the show, okay? That's a good thing. Anyway, how are you? I hope you're well. I hope you're great. I hope you're eating something delicious and drinking something cozy and fall-like. It's a perfect time of year, and I'm so excited for this month and for this episode. I cannot believe who we got for this episode. You all don't understand how thrilled. The incomparable, the amazing, the talented leemurray, author, editor, poet extraordinaire from New Zealand. I cannot believe it. She is a literal godsend. She is an incredible human being and such a beautiful writer, and just really speaks to the Floaties for Krakens message, you know, about exploring monstrosity through cultural vibrancy, right, and storytelling and folklore. And I can't believe it. I can't believe that we got her on the show, Cuttlefish. Can you believe it? She's incredible. She's a 5-time Bram Stoker Award winner, Shirley Jackson Award winner. I mean, she's amazing. She's just something out of this world, and I cannot believe we had the pleasure of getting to know her and the pleasure of interviewing her for this episode. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that this show has given me the ticket to meet people as inspiring as Lee. And I'm excited for you all to listen to what she has to say. She has some just incredible literature out that I'll link everything down below. And also specifically this week, a little movie she's been working on has premiered over in New Zealand, known as Grafted. I don't want to give too much away, but here's a little, I'm gonna put it right here, a little snippet of what this movie's gonna look like. It's intense, it's amazing, it's incredible. I'm so excited for the world to see it. It is intense, let me just say that. It's really intense and contains a lot of body horror, but there's a reason for it. And it's very thoughtful. You know, Lee doesn't do anything that's not thoughtful, so yeah, Grafted, incredible. leemurray is incredible. She also has an incredible book out that we'll be talking a lot about throughout the entirety of this episode. I'll put that right here. It's about fox spirits. Obviously, we're gonna be talking about it in depth, and I'm excited for you all to listen. Anyway, I'm blabbing. I am just so excited for this episode to premiere. I'm thankful, Lee. Thank you so much for writing always from your heart, telling stories about monstrous women when monstrous women feel too scared to speak up for themselves. Thank you for documenting such important cultural experiences, and just for being a lighthouse for individuals with mental health difficulties as well. I'm so excited to see what you're creating at the Horror Writers Association and just for the world. So thank you. Thank you for everything. Um, yeah. Well, ladies and cuttlefish, let me introduce to you 9 cups of tea for fox spirits. Well, hello again, Lee, for the second time. How are you?
Oh, it's wonderful to be here, Camille. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is truly an honor. I am so thrilled to be able to talk to you today and just to dive into your brain, your wonderful brain about the works you've created, but also just kind of your explorations on what it means to be monstrous and kind of the explorations and layers of monstrosity itself and horror. So I'm thrilled. I'm so excited, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's going to be a great conversation, I think.
Well, it's 7 a.m. in the morning here in New Zealand, so I'll be drinking my coffee and hopefully I won't be too dozy. So,
Which means you're even more of a superhero for being awake so early. So an
and
extra.
also I'm coming from tomorrow as well, Camille. So for you, so I can give you a heads up on what the day is going to look like as we finish this recording. So
Great. I
that'll
hope
be
it's a good day.
fun.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Oh my goodness. Well, so many questions, but I bet we should just start with, Lee, who are you? What do you do? What are your passions and kind of what's your, I don't know, interest in the world of the other and the spooky?
Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, I am a writer, editor, poet. I'm a screenwriter from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm a third generation Chinese New Zealander. So in New Zealand, we'd say Chinese, we would say Tauiwi or Pak and Pakeha. And yeah, I love the monstrous, and we can talk a little bit about how I came to the monstrous. I am a monster, I think, and most of my work has a focus somewhere along the line on monsters and the monstrous. So yeah, so I think I'm in the right place from the sounds of it. I have written about a kraken. So I have a book about a kraken. So I'm definitely think I'm in the right place. So
100%, 1 billion%. And we're going to link every single book and everything about you in our description box. So I'm excited for everybody who's listening to read those because your work is just so amazing, so exciting. And, okay, I do want to ask you about your definition of a monster, especially since you wrote also another book called Grotesque. But I kind of want to pick your brain in terms of, how young were you when you were first interested or introduced to the world of horror or monstrosity or the spooky world?
yeah, isn't this interesting? Right. Okay. So here's the story. When I was a little girl living in New Zealand, there were no books about people who looked like me.
Hmm.
There were no books about Chinese New Zealand girls when I went to school. There was nothing. There's
Yeah.
almost probably still is nothing except for a very few books books that I've written. So sometimes you have to sort of pull your sleeves up and write them. There are a few others now. We've been very lucky at the moment to have in New Zealand. Our poet laureate is a queer Chinese man named Chris C. He's an incredible poet, and he's been writing about the Chinese New Zealand experience, and also just won our National Book Prize, the Ockham Prize. A woman called Grace Lee, who's based in Australia but is a New Zealander, and she has also written about the Chinese New Zealand experience in poetry. So
It's amazing.
I think we're seeing some other things happening now, and there's been a few books come out, and not so much children's picture books, but we are getting a few more titles that represent our experience, and that's big thing. It's really important to see yourself in story. So where
Mm.
did I see myself in story? And I, not it's only been a couple of years ago that I, really remember that it just kind of came back to me. Of course, this was the book. And when I was in I think about intermediate school, I
Yeah.
read John Wyndham's The Chrysalids. Had also read, Day of the Triffids, and so that was also about monsters and a
Yeah.
dark sort of time. And so I read The Chrysalids, which I think it came out in 1954. So I'm pretty sure there's no spoilers if I say that in that
No, you're
story,
fine.
yeah, in that story, there's a it's a dystopia. It's for young people, YA book, and in that story, um, the people who are ostracized are these teenagers who are mutants after the Cold War, and after the radiations come down, and these young people have been thrown out of society because they are mutants, and they are also telepathic. So they understand things, they understand each other, and those young people, when they find sanctuary, they know that there is a sanctuary in a place far off called New Zealand. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm one of those mutants, I'm a monster. And so that was kind of the first place that I felt I really identified with a story and saw myself in the story. That was the very first story that I thought, yep, that's me. I'm one of those monsters that escaped to New Zealand. And yeah, so there you go. That was the first time.
That's incredible. I mean, I don't know. I find that so moving, of course, but I think it's so beautiful that you saw such positivity too, like in that world of, hey, I think I see myself. I think there's somebody that actually looks like me and is, I don't know, experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing. And I think it's so
Yeah,
beautiful, when people can
yeah.
find solace in monsters,
Yeah, that's right. I think monsters are always a metaphor for the other, for isolation,
Yeah.
um the for difference, and for things we're not sure about, and we need to explore them, but they give us some distance and some when it's not a person, you can put it on the page and explore it and see what it is. And I think, if we look at um, say pandemic fiction, and I know I've said this before in
Mhm.
other places, that pandemic fiction, the stories about viruses and the world being overrun, those are often couched in the zombie monstrous, the zombie trope, because we become something when we're ill that other people don't want to be near,
Right, right.
and they infect, and when we're ill, we're in a kind of half life, aren't we? We're not quite
Hmm.
ourselves, and so you can see, if only people had read more zombie fiction. I think a lot of people read zombie fiction during, those few very isolating, very othering years,
Oh
and so
yeah.
I think that the monsters have such an important place as metaphor, as explaining things, and that we don't understand, or we are struggling to understand.
Mm.
They play such an important role, I think, in how we process and make sense of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely they do. And I love that you mentioned zombies. You're so correct. There is that feeling too of just like the loss of control, which I think all of us felt during those years, and kind of the unknown and not really understanding fully what's going on with your body. And that could be mentally too, right? It was a very dark year for a lot of us mentally. And I think it's so
Absolutely, yes, yes.
right. And it's so cool to see, I don't know, how things can be digested better with metaphor, of course. But for many of us, right, it lurks in the spookiness. It lurks in these terrifying creatures. Like it almost allows us to be terrifying as well. And I think that's what's really cool, to have that space of monstrosity or mistake, or I don't know what I'm doing. I feel very lost and very otherized in this moment. And I don't know. It's nice to relate you know?
Yeah, I don't think you're unique in that, Camille. I think that in the world at the moment, there's just so much going on. There's so many conflicts and tensions. Often those things are, those kinds of when we are frightened about things, we want to
Mm,
blame someone, and so it's very easy to see the culture wars coming down. So people always it's someone else's fault. It's there's all of this, and so I think lots of us are feeling othered and isolated and confused, and so that's where these things happen. And I think the world is a very scary place at the moment, so there is a lot of processing to be done. And monsters help
mm,
us do that for certain, certainly in
definitely.
literature and film. And I love that you mentioned mental health because I'm actually the co chair of the Mental Health Initiative for the Horror Writers Association. And so, looking at how we can use the monstrous to still interpret and represent mental illness, but in a way that doesn't demonize the person. It's the
Mm,
mental illness that is strange and uncertain and monstrous, and not the person who.
mm,
And that's been a real issue in horror over the years, where people have been demonized. So and even if you think about our language, we just use these casual flyaway comments about mental illness. Oh, she's batshit crazy. She's,
mhm.
what a Looney Tune, and
Yeah.
anyone who doesn't fit what we think is appropriate behavior or as a group of society that we want to denigrate, then we can use those sort of mental health kind of derogatory terms. And it has been so trivialized in our
Mm,
literature and in our films and even in our everyday life. And it's something I like to see changed. So I'm
yeah.
doing a lot of work with my colleague from the UK, Dave Jeffrey, and I have a bit of a team behind me at the HWA. And so we're trying to sort of what's the word? We're trying to sort of make people more aware that that people with mental illness want to see themselves in stories too, but they're not just a function of their mental illness. I mean, I have
Mm,
anxiety and depression, but I hope you're not just seeing, the black dog sitting here. I hope you see me as a nuanced, complicated, person who with feelings and needs
yeah.
and all of
Yeah.
those things. So I think there's just such an monsters are give us such a good opportunity to look at that. And so I'm exploring that more. I'm hoping to announce a project soon that looks at exactly that topic. So
Oh,
watch your
great.
space.
Oh, that's so oh, I'm so thrilled that you have that role. It is just so important, and it's just so scary to talk about those things, right? And as you said, especially when they're trivialized, especially when people don't truly believe that, I can't see what you're going through, so maybe it doesn't exist, right? Or as you mentioned, they put you in a box of this black dog, right? Or what have you. And it can feel so terrifying. And it's so important to have people like you, right? To have people that fight for you. And not only that, but have walked in your shoes and can see really, really what dark things can happen to not only your brain, but to how people react to your brain. It can be a very scary thing. And I think it's so amazing that you're doing that work. I'm so excited to hear about that project one day. That's
It's very
so
soon. I
great.
mean, the contract's been signed, so just waiting for the publisher to announce that one. So, yes, I'm very excited, and I want to see more voices in that space, and also some help for writers. How can we do it better? And sometimes I think we need to be shown the way and sort of what 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 techniques and strategies and structures work, and in our writing that doesn't stigmatize people, but is still useful in showing the way and helping us process and all of those
Oh,
things. So I
that's
think there's
brilliant.
still work to be done. I am very excited about it.
Yeah.
And there's some really great work being done in this space. It's sort of the cutting edge of horror. Horror, especially, is very good for this.
Oh,
It's very good for this because it's always been one of those genres that's a little bit the ugly stepsister is already monstrous, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the place to explore those things. I really believe that. And I think, I often say this, but I think people need to expand their view of what horror is, because it doesn't have to have, the demon wielding a chainsaw. It could be, it doesn't have to be that very stereotypical approach to writing. It can be fresh and new and innovative in ways that open these very important issues and allow them to be discussed.
That's exactly it. Allow them to be discussed. I don't know. It's so great. I'm so glad you're carving those spaces. You're making sure that people feel safe in spaces like that. And that's so cool. That's so exciting. It makes so much sense too. Obviously through your writing and everything, but it makes sense that you hold that position, and I'm excited to see where that goes. I think that's going to be so exciting.
Thank you. Well, it's not
Oh
just me, obviously, and
yeah.
you can't do anything in a vacuum. You really need good team around you, and I'm very lucky that to have a great team, and people are interested. And I think it's been neglected for such a long time. It's not something we talk about, even culturally. Lots of societies, don't discuss these things. They're the kind of things that are just, we don't talk about that. And I think it's time. And I think, perhaps the fact that we're coming off, the back end of a global pandemic. Oh, excuse me,
Yeah.
something's dinging. I hope that's not dinging in your ear.
Oh, nope,
Um,
nope.
yes, I think the fact that we're coming off that pandemic has made people more aware. Lots of people suffered from mental illness, and things were exacerbated when people were stuck at home and not able to connect with other people. And so I think that we're more aware of that right now, than we
Mhm.
have that had been perhaps prior to 2020. So
Definitely. Definitely. It was a really hard time. And I think everybody, experienced loss like in some form, whether that was a human or yourself. And I think that was very frightening for a lot of people. And I'm just like you, I've been so amazed with the work that has kind of come out of it, to see how humans express themselves now and talk about very vulnerable things so openly. I mean, I don't know. It makes me very excited. It makes me very happy that people can talk about these things, because it's necessary. It's so needed. It's so needed.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you talked about your work with the Horror Writers Association, and you also have many accolades, in your work as an author. I mean, you even had your New Zealand Prime Minister Award for Literary Achievement, which is so exciting and so thrilling. And I'm
That's that
curious.
one there. So excuse me for
Ah!
my I just popped that up there before we got on because I thought, oh, I've got nothing that you can see. Um,
Oh
yes,
my
so
gosh.
yeah, so my husband's making me these lovely new shelves, wall to ceiling shelves in the office. So they're not done yet, so you can see there's no books up, there's nothing behind me.
Oh,
But yeah, that is the Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement in Fiction. It's one of New Zealand's highest accolades. Some of our biggest writers ever are on that list, and I am the first Chinese New Zealander. In fact, I'm the first Asian New Zealander to ever appear in the awards history. So
oh
feeling
my
very, very
gosh.
excited about that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing and so well deserved, Lee. That
Oh,
is so,
thank
so
you. And
exciting.
I think it's come with some money attached, which was rather nice. So that was
Right.
really, because writing is not easy. So it came with 60,000 New Zealand dollars, which was just lovely boost
Oh,
to my confidence.
oh my gosh. No, you deserve it. You deserve all the money in the world.
Well, thank you,
Everything.
because actually writing is a very, very hard gig. That's the monster, really. It's very, very hard to get to make a living as a writer, and I am a working writer, so that was a really nice little boost
Oh, I'm
to
so
my
glad.
income. And one radio announcer in New Zealand said to me, "Well, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to go on a trip?" And I thought, "No, it's going to pay for some bread and maybe some milk."
Every Reading, things like eating.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure how many people sort of really do know that the life of a writer can be quite precarious, and it's not, it's not well paid. I think there's a kind of joke going around the community, and I don't know if you've seen that meme where, you know, l- in 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 Little Women, Louisa May Alcott's story, Joe is the main character
Right.
is very excited because I think she gets £200 for a story, right? She gets
Oh my
200 or
gosh.
$200 for a short story. And that's what you get now, so that hasn't gone up in X number of 100 years and
Oh my
so,
gosh.
and it can take a week or 2 weeks to come up with an idea.
Can you
And
hear that? It's
yeah.
storming over here.
Oh,
It just
okay.
started. So I
Yeah.
apologize
Goodness.
if you can hear
No, that's
that.
all right. No, no, that's all right. I thought, oh, that sounds like someone's bathwater going out. Um, yeah. So that idea that writers, and I think there's this notion on television that writers.
Oh goodness. One second, Lee. 1 second. Something happened. Let me pause the recording.
And I'll go back to that. So now
There
that
we
the
go.
bathtub has stopped making a noise, um,
Lovely.
yeah, so writers, in 200 years, writers aren't really earning much more. And I think there is a perception that writers earn a lot of money. We see on television these champagne launches and, those very romantic notions of what writing is. But in fact, it's a pretty hard slog, and the world is actually quite interesting now with AI and
Yeah.
lots of new challenges.
Yeah.
Books and bricks and mortar stores sort of closing, and lots of issues around how we get our books and how we get our stories out into the world and still get paid. So it's a
Mm.
tricky one. Yeah.
Mm. It's incredibly tricky, and I'm serious when I say you are a superhero,
Oh,
because
I don't
it's
think
not
so.
easy. It's not easy to do this stuff, right? And of course I know, right? Like, we don't do the things we love just for the money. Of course not. Like, there's a reason for it, but it's hard. It's hard when, that is your job, and you need to eat, and you need to put food on the table, and be sustainable. It's a very conflicting thing, but I think you chose
Yeah.
the right path.
Well,
you know?
I'm actually a scientist by profession, and I think it's interesting that we say yes, we do it because we love it, which is true. I absolutely do love it.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that if a plumber, likes his work, we don't not pay them,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so
That's true.
you would never dream of going to see your accountant and your lawyer, and that if they happen to be happy at the job they do, then we'll decide not to pay. That's not,
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, you love it, so I shouldn't have to pay you.
That's true.
That's not reality. That's not, it's
Yeah.
work still. It is still work, even if we do love what we do. And
Hmm.
I think it's important to say that we process the world through story. We're always consuming story every moment of the day. We're sitting around a table with our family and friends, and we're telling stories about what we've done or someone we've met or places we've been.
Yeah.
We're couching those things in stories in our experience and our perspective. We're consuming news stories and videos, and we're watching social media, and those are stories. And so
Mhm.
the way we process the world is through story. It's how we make sense of things. And so, you know, um, it's such an important aspect. And so I think it's a little bit like cooking, isn't it? Everyone
Mhm.
has to cook dinner, but who is the chef?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when you go to a restaurant, you pay money for the chef to make you something a little special. So maybe that's part of it, is the fact that we all tell stories and
Yeah.
do and consume stories. So we've kind of devalued it in some way. I don't know. It's a little bit
Mm.
like mothers, maybe, like mothers
Mm.
do all this free work, but it's the most important
Mhm.
work, and yet we sort of it's all so I don't know, maybe it's something like that. It's the important work that we do to make sense of the world, and yet it seems a little devalued. So
Oh, 100%. And it's not fair. None of it is fair at all. It's completely undervalued.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I was very happy to receive that lovely award that came with money. So there you
Yes.
go.
Yes. I'm so glad you got it. That's amazing. What a beautiful display there too. I think that's
Well, it
great.
will be, I think, once we get those shelves up, and I can fill them with books because I have a lot of books, as you can imagine.
I can only imagine. I just picture walls and walls, a library of your own, which is great, which is fantastic. Okay, so we've been throwing around the term a lot already, but I'm curious, Lee, what is your definition of a monster?
Um, yeah, a monster. I really don't know what my definition of a monster is. I think would say myself. I think I am a monster, and I think a monster is the the embodiment of everything that we don't understand, and we don't, and we so therefore we're afraid. So it's a little bit like that notion, that Lovecraft notion of, that uncertainty, the thing we don't know that we can't explain, and that it becomes this monstrous thing. And I think that's probably the closest I can get to a definition of what is a monster. Yeah.
I think that's perfect. I think that's so great. It just explains further how layered we are as people. And I think there's no one way to define monster, right? It's forever changing and evolving and expressing itself in different ways. And I think it's just like us, right? So are we. And I love seeing those two in the same sentence. I think that's a fantastic definition.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
if you think about, even every culture has its own monster stories, doesn't it? There's the
Hmm.
evolution, the stories of creation, and the stories around, this is the one we'll get to, is around women, because women
Yeah,
are almost always monstrous.
of course.
They are perceived as being monstrous because of that femininity, that ability to bear children, which is not understood by for men, so for half of society doesn't know how that feels, and or more than half of society. And so
Yeah.
it's a very scary thing. So women have always been couched in the monstrous. And I think if you think
Mm,
of all the different cultures, and every culture has some kind of zombie, that
yeah.
illness thing.
Yeah.
So there are so gods and deities, and there's always a trickster. Like
Hmm.
almost every culture has these kinds of stories. And so I think the monstrous is just such a universal thing for what we don't understand, what we can't yet explain, or what frightens us. So it's a perfect place to start a dialogue.
Oh, definitely. If you grew up as a monstrous woman, it's a wonderful place to begin your creative writing. I feel like you have a lot to talk about. So I love that. I'm right there with you.
I do
And
know that I'm being monstrous by not answering any of these questions in order that you very you
oh,
very
it doesn't matter. Nope. I want just your truest responses, Lee. So however we go about it, that's perfect.
So you
That's
did
exactly
all
how it
your
should
all
be.
such a great job of preparing this interview, and I've gone completely off
No.
track and all over the place. So
There is no structure. Just like our definition of monster, there's no set way of defining it. So do not worry about it. You're answering everything perfectly. And I love that you mentioned your cultural background and kind of how across cultures, across borders, right, there are those monstrous women that are told in stories and transmitted, in so many different ways through family lines or what have you. And I'm curious, how did your cultural background inspire both your writing, yes, but also those intersections with horror and monstrosity?
yeah. So this is a really interesting thing, because I have not been brave enough. So I've always written about monsters, and but I have not been brave enough to really talk about my cultural heritage until fairly recently. So I have written a series with Dan Raybart's called the Path of Ra series, and in that series I put myself in. So, and that was really cheating because Dan and I decided we were going to work together on sort of a horror thriller supernatural novel, and he is Maori, and so he comes from this wonderfully rich, layered, beautiful cultural background. And both of us suffer a little bit from sort of mental health issues, depression at times. And so we wanted that. We both sort of have some understanding of neurodiversity, so we wanted that in there. And so for my character, so we did a he said, she said story. So we both tried to embody mostly one character. So it's the story of um, a Maori man and a Chinese woman who are brother and sister by whongai, which is the Maori notion of adoption. And so the normal squabbly brother sister kind of family dynamic, but in fact, a lot of the Maori cultural sort of family ways of family, of working in a family and whānau, how the extended family is very important, and all of those social norms are very similar across Maori culture and Chinese culture. So I wrote this very uptight Chinese scientist because that's my kind of background, and he wrote this sort of brooding, sort of bad boy Maori character, the brother who could see between who was a matakita, who could see between the realms, who could speak between, and could hear, spirits from the other side. And so we had such a lot of fun with that. And that was the really first time I'd put myself in a story and, some of my cultural heritage into a story. And it really was completely out of laziness, because we thought, oh, well, if we're going to write a story that where we're both in it, let's do it so that we'll set it in New Zealand because we know New Zealand, and we'll use characters that draw from our own experience because we know ourselves, right? And we'll see what we get. And of course, it isn't me and it isn't him, but it was really fun to explore that. And that was probably the first time. So I'm going to say that was around, we started that series and was just going to be a novella, and it turned out to be a 3-book series. And we started that series, I think, 2014. So we're talking 10 years ago now. So that was really the first time that I sort of started. And then the pandemic came, and I ran into Genevieve Flynn, who is an Australian, a Malaysian Chinese Australian, at a conference in Australia. And we kind of did. I've told this story before, but we were both conscientious Asian girls. So we turned up because we are conscientious Asian girls. We turned up half an hour early to a panel session, and we were standing outside. There was just the two of us, and we recognized that straight away, that here we were early, and it was because we're both Asian girls, and we wanted to make sure that we got there in time, that we were prepared, that we could get a good seat, all of those things. So of course we got talking, about being Asian and the forces and the influences that make us come early to a panel. And we talked about, could we back a trailer, and what our mothers expected of us, and why weren't we doctors, because we're supposed to be doctors when you're Chinese, you're supposed to grow up and be a doctor. And all those things. And then we started talking about where were the horror writers, where were the horror writers, where were the women in this space. And that we spent the weekend together just chatting about those things, and that recognition of there's another monster, like monsters know each other, they know. And and I'd seen, some of Genevieve's work in the past. Like we'd moved in the same circles, but we lived in different countries. So I knew of her, and I was part of the Australian Horror Writers Association, and I'd been involved in the mentorship program, and I had had allocated her, a mentor at that time. I think it was Deb Sheldon, who was a fabulous Australian horror writer. And so, I knew of her, but we'd never kind of encountered one another. And so I'd read some of her work. Straight away, I knew we were going to have this, we had this connection. And there's nothing more empowering than connection, is there? And so, and you can do that through literature. It isn't just, when you see yourself in literature, when you see someone else who has your experience and does it in such a way that resonates for you. So we thought we needed this experience and this connection on the page. And this was the end of 2019. So, you know, it was right in the middle of Australian bushfires. Were just were, really rife at the time. It was an
Right.
awful, awful time. And then also there was this pandemic on the horizon. But we went home and we got a publisher attached to the work, and we got some, contributors together. We started reading. Anyway, so we were underway, and then the pandemic came down, and sort of 4 or 5 months later, we were all in lockdown. And we thought, well, maybe we'll put this aside because, it's not the right timing. Publishing was in a nosedive,
Sure.
the stores were all closed. Everyone was, really very stressed. And our contributor said, "No, hell no. We absolutely have to do this anthology." I'll hold it up. It's called Black Cranes: Tales of Unquiet
Yes.
Women.
Yes.
And because they were experiencing, there was all these Asian women living in the pandemic, experiencing this very strong anti-Asian sentiment, which was sort of going around the world, part of sort of a very who's the other, who should we blame, that whole monstrous thing. And I think Asian people really came off very badly there, whether they had anything to do with it or not. People were looking for someone to blame, and Asian people were targeted, and so that we saw attacks on Asians go up. And so our contributors go, no, we have something to say right now. We need to be heard. These stories of the monstrous, they need to be out there. And so they urged us to sort of push on. And so we put that book out at the end of 2020. And I think it was because people were trying to understand why this was, that the book did so well. It won a Bram Stoker Award, it won a Shirley
Yes.
Jackson Award, it was nominated for an Aurealis and a Australian Shadows and a British Fantasy Locus. Like it was very, very well received. And so that was kind of the start of me being brave, because suddenly I had the sisterhood of other women and creatives, and we had some non-binary people in that book as well. It just that otherness that comes with being that different, and being queer and or non or gender fluid in the Asian community can be very tough. That's not something that's particularly well accepted, nor is mental illness. And so
Right.
this book was so important. It seemed to be a groundbreaking book. But then I was brave, because then I had this group. And when you're not alone and when you have that connection, you can just feel a bit braver about putting your own stories out there and delving a little bit deeper into your own personal experience, and really sort of turning yourself inside out to create those stories that are exceptional, or well, no, that sounds like a lot of hubris, but that really speak to people. And you really have to write that story, you really have to turn yourself inside out and and be vulnerable and allow yourself to bleed onto the page. And I think um, that courage, that collective courage, really helped me. So from there, we still had stories to write and things to say. Four of us went on to write Tortured Willows, which is a poetry collection on the same theme as Black Cranes, and that also won a Bram Stoker Award, and was a runner-up in the Elgin Awards for speculative poetry. So,
That's
I won
amazing.
a Australian Shadows for a story, for a poem out of that work. So we've been just so lucky with the response to that work, and I do feel a lot of it came out of that pandemic when there was so much interest in what's going on and why is there this anti-Asian sentiment, and people were really trying to understand and make sense of why we were in this horrible thing, this scary, frightening, horrible thing. So, and then from there, like, we still had things to say and I still had
Yes.
connections to make. So this was the next book, which was, so we reached people with black cranes with short story, and then
Right.
Tortured Willows, which I don't have on my desk, was poetry. And then this one is Unquiet Spirits, came out last year and is a collection of 21 essays by Asian women in horror. And that takes a monster. Each story takes a monster of some sort, usually from Asian mythology, but one or two writers also looked at Christian mythology and how that worked in alongside our Asian culture, and how you where the intersection of culture and myth and
Mm-hmm.
um, society all fits together in our world, and how we see our identity.
Oh yeah.
And so that story looks at fox spirits, and it looks at vampires and
Yes.
hungry ghosts, and all sorts of absolutely, you know um, fabulously, the white lady of Singaporean myth, and just looks at all of the ways that we look at women, particularly in society, and other them through these stories of the monster. In fact, most monsters are women in
Mm-hmm.
Asian culture. Isn't that
Mm-hmm.
scary? Because I think perhaps patriarchal society in the past realized that women actually have a great deal of power, so they needed to kind of
Mm-hmm.
oppress women and keep them down,
Mm-hmm.
because that collective power is quite scary. So that's a
Yeah.
scary thing. So yes, so I have, so it's kind of been a snowball, Camille. It's just kind of gone. When you get that little ounce of bravery, when you have these people behind you who say you can do this, and yes, we need to hear these stories and more of this, please. And then suddenly you're sort of girded and galvanized with this, collective energy and courage, and that has been, a fabulous thing. It's not really me that's been driving it. It's really been these wonderful fresh voices, and honestly, they're doing such incredible things. Kirsty Kolsky has
Oh.
a new anthology just about to close called Silk and Sinew, which is coming a look at folk horror around, the body um, of Asian diaspora people, and how you carry your heritage with you in your body when you're not in that original place of origin and
Ugh.
you've moved. Frances Pye is doing cozy horror. We've got Ai Zhang, who's just won the Bram Stoker and the
Mm-hmm.
Nebula Award, I believe, for Lingun, which is a story of grief, and a story of Asian grief, and through the monstrous, through ghosts. So that's incredibly, and the way that grief kind of paralyzes us in this no man's land. Incredibly powerful work. We've got Jen McCarthy working in succubuses, and
Ugh.
just there is,
Incredible.
and yet there is just so much wonderful work. Grace Chan has moved into more the sci-fi horror side of it, and she wrote every version of You, so she's an Australian writer. So that, my Black Cranes and Unquiet Spirits, sort of community of sisters are doing such wonderful work in this space. And so that's kind of where that my interest in this cultural aspect of monsters has come about, and so now I've been doing some of my own work in that area. So because of the bravery these women have given me. They inspire me every day. It's just so
Oh,
exciting.
absolutely. And you inspire them, right, in return, and other individuals that read your work all together and see this band of women that are strong and powerful, but talk about the things that hurt, right? They allow themselves, as you mentioned, I love this, that you bleed on the page, right? Because that's such a vulnerable thing to do, to take that first leap and do that. But when other women, right, read your work and see you all doing this and seeing the power that comes from it, right, it's as you mentioned, so much easier when you see somebody like you doing that and talking about these things. It's like, okay, great, I can do that too. I can explore these things, and it'll be scary and it'll be hard, and as you mentioned, it won't all come at one time, right? It might be a ripple effect. You might start something and maybe take a break on it and like think about it and explore it a little bit more, or maybe the world happens, right, and it puts things on pause. But I don't know, I think the work that you're doing is so incredible, and the women, all of the women you mentioned, oh my goodness, are you kidding?
Yes,
Such great work.
I
Such
know. There's so much great work. It's really exciting to see. Nadia won just won a Bram Stoker for Nadia Bulkin just won
yes,
a Bram
yes.
Stoker for a story in the oh sorry her for an essay in this collection. In fact, there were three essays from the collection on the Bram Stoker ballot this year. So that was
Golly.
and the book itself was as well. So that was hugely affirming. But her essay, I think it's going to be reprinted in Gamut coming up. So,
Oh,
so that will be people might want to read that, or even get the book to read it. But it's an
definitely.
incredibly beautiful story, and it's about it's about I think it's called Lahar, which is the feminine version of running amok. You know, the
Oh my
Indonesian
goodness.
phrase to run amok, which is to go a bit crazy and to be a
Yeah.
bit of a berserker. Well, there is a feminine version of that, and she wrote a really incredible. I knew nothing about this. I knew nothing,
Yeah.
but it is a mental health story if you think about that. And so fascinatingly interesting, and this is the thing, we don't know some of these things. You're not necessarily access to those interesting and cultural explanations for things,
Hmm.
and so yeah, it's a little bit like the crazy woman that we lock in the attic. do you,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Of
And it
course
also
I do.
she gives this wonderful kind of it's a little bit like if you're the crazy person on the bus, no one's going to sit next to you.
Right. Right.
So women are couched in that craziness. If you're not conforming to the way we want you to conform, you are
Hmm.
crazy. You are
Hmm.
a monster and running amok, and we will isolate you. And so I thought
Exactly.
it was a fantastic way to examine the way that we approach people and the monstrous in our what we consider monstrous, because sometimes the monster is just simply the person who's not doing what we want them to do.
Hmm.
They're not
Absolutely.
conforming to a certain standard or a way of thinking or perspective or behavior that we demand from them. And that's
Hmm.
often women, it's often minority groups,
Hmm.
um, and people who are different from us, look different from us. They eat different food and they live a different way,
Right.
and it's yeah, it's fascinating. I'm very excited about the whole thing. So it's nothing. It's not me. I didn't really drive it. I just, once the voice, I'm just discovering all these voices, and I think the power of being seen and heard is just,
Mhm.
it is incredibly inspiring. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by these fantastically talented women, and a lot of them young women who have fresh ideas. So
Yeah.
yeah, I am excited, but I have been doing my own work in this area. Um, and just recently, at the beginning in April, this book came out, which is
Yes, yes, yes,
called
yes.
Fox Spirit on a Distant Cloud, which is my own piece of work around an Asian monster. In fact, the fox spirit.
Yes. What is a
And
fox spirit? Please tell everyone.
so, well, it's a little. It has. It's quite universal across Asian cultures. So you have I don't even know how to pronounce it because I don't speak Cantonese. So
Right, yeah.
that just I think it's a Huli Jing, I think, which is the Chinese version of the monster. It's called, I think, a kitsune in Japanese culture, and I think it's called a inuho in Korean culture. So anyway, the fox is a supernatural celestial being, um, but in order to ascend to the celestial heavens, this particular fox, who is a shapeshifter, must put the skulls on of 9 women through the ages, in order to become her authentic self and to
Oh my
experience
goodness.
those lives. And she's usually a woman. Sometimes she can embody a man, but mostly it's a woman, and
Right.
she's seen as malevolent, or she can be good, but mostly she's seen as malevolent,
Mm,
um, or kind of sort of seductress,
mm,
just evil and something to be shunned.
mm.
And so I took this metaphor. I'd already seen it come in Black Cranes. Rena Mason
Yeah.
has a beautiful, beautiful story in Black Cranes about it's called the ninth tale, and it is the ninth tale
Oh, that's
in this
perfect.
book. Yes, and it tells of a sort of a mischievous fox spirit trying to get to the heavens, and how she's trying to be
Mm,
herself, and how she is
mhm.
isolated. So, and then in this story, we have a beautiful essay by Christy Kolsky,
Yes.
who talks about how she's kind of trying to find her cultural heritage, because her Korean mother, died when she was very young, and so she's
Mm,
been trying to find her way back into her culture. So that was
yes.
beautifully done through the fox spirit. And my own daughter, Celine Murray, is a queer Chinese, part Maori, part Scottish,
Yes.
mix
Yes.
of identity. So she used the fox spirit as a way to explore identity and being,
Oh,
and not fitting into any kind of category. So that was really wonderful.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
so I've been very lucky to be immersed in all these wonderful tales around, new, fresh tales around fox spirits.
Yes.
I also did, oh, I don't have it on my desk, Asian short stories
Yes.
by Flame Tree Press. Did a wonderful volume a couple of years ago, and I was associate editor there, and there were some wonderful fox spirit stories in there from different cultures as well. So this fox spirit, excited me for that
Yeah.
notion of trying to be your true self. And you can see I've been a mutant from the very beginning
Mm,
of my literary sort of
yeah. Yeah.
awakening. And so for me, who am I? What am I writing? I'm this Chinese woman, part Chinese, half European woman, living in a society, in this multicultural society where I haven't really
Mhm.
been seen. And what that's, what is that experience,
Right.
and so fox spirit on a distant cloud takes the fox spirit. Oh, a distant cloud, the Maori name for New Zealand is the land of the long white cloud,
Oh, that's
Aotearoa. And
lovely.
so a fox spirit on a distant cloud speaks to what it is to be this othered, monstrous thing in New Zealand. And so I take 9 lives of Chinese women in New Zealand and use the fox spirit as a lens to experience those lives through this prose poetry collection. So yes, and so it
That's so
was a little bit
amazing.
innovative. I was very lucky to receive, it was my first ever grant. I received a grant from the Grimshaw Sargison Trust to do this work, and I wrote
Oh,
this during the pandemic, or towards the end of the pandemic.
right.
And so it was really, really hard. But
Yes.
and because of all the things that were going on, but also because I was exploring the stories that didn't get told. So because Chinese people are very good at sort of stifling the bad, and we don't tell about those those things that happened. And lots of bad things happen to women, and women have struggled and suffered. And so I was looking for those stories that didn't get told. So they would be very clinically told in the archives and in the newspaper, the things where, you know, a Chinese woman took a cleaver to her child and cut them in half. And I wanted to know what, I mean, that's a monstrous act, but what would make a person so desperate that they would chop their daughter in half? You know, what
Right.
possible motivation would someone have for that? So it was an opportunity to take the fox spirit, who is a shapeshifter who wears the skulls of other beings and other people in order to be her true authentic self, to find my way through the history of Chinese women in New Zealand. So the stories are not really fiction and they're not really non-fiction, so they're a blend, because obviously these stories are short and clinical and they don't have the whole. I wanted to know, I wanted to embody those women and tell their stories.
Yes.
So it was a huge responsibility and very scary and angsty, and put
Of
myself in there.
course.
And I
Yes.
talked to women, and I talked to families, and the stories that, you know, so some of the stories are a blend of this and that, and this person's story, and also this person's story, and from the
Yeah.
archives. And so they are 9 stories of lives which may or may not happen. You see, so some of them have happened, but they might not have happened quite that way. So it's kind of biography, and it's kind of memoir, and it's kind of nonfiction, and it's kind of fiction, and it didn't fit anywhere at all. And because of that, it won the Laura Solomon Cuba New Zealand Society of Authors Laura Solomon Cuba Press Prize for innovative and original work. And so I've been very lucky already. It's had some wonderful reviews. The Poet Laureate
Nice.
reviewed it, and the Academy of New Zealand Literature gave it a lovely review. So I've been just very excited about the response to it. And here at home, where my work is not very well known, I'm not. This is the first book I have had published in New Zealand with a New Zealand publisher in, I'm
Wow.
going to say, 15 years.
Wow, I didn't know that actually. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
so that is very exciting to have something available for my, you know, my New Zealand, my country, for my, you know, out there and available to be bought in New Zealand bookstores. So that is very exciting for me.
Oh, it's incredibly exciting. Oh my goodness. What an amazing work. It's so lovely, and I love your use of metaphor with these 9 women, right? With these 9 explorations, with these feelings of, I don't know, trying to shield the bad things that happen, right? Not talking about the difficulties in one's life because you feel that's saving you, you feel that's saving others around you. And in reality, talking about these things is kind of what sets us free in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
I love your use of I love shapeshifters. I think shapeshifters are so fascinating, so fun to learn about, as a monster. But I love kind of your parallels of the many hats almost Asian women wear, right? The many masks and what they feel they have to wear, in certain settings, in certain situations in their life, right? And one of my favorite things that I think you explore so beautifully, I love folklore, right? Like all of us do. And I think one of the very interesting things about folklore, a lot of people don't realize that generational trauma is folklore, right? It's something that's passed
Totally.
down to us, right? That we
Totally.
didn't maybe ask for, that we didn't know about, that we don't understand totally, right? And I think what's even more exciting is you're using these cultural monsters, these traditional folkloric beings, right, to talk about these mental difficulties, these situational difficulties, these cultural difficulties that we've had for centuries, right, but putting them together in this beautiful little piece of work. It's so exciting. It's so excitingly what you're doing, truly.
I do love it. And I love to be able to bring in the New Zealand monsters as well. And I think for this particular book, for Foxbird on a Distant Cloud, one of the things I discovered while writing it, and this was not something I expected. I expected the fox spirit to have power, because she's
Huh.
quite powerful in mythology. She can come in and
Sure.
she can be something else, and she's deceptive, but in actual fact, I found that when she is a little fox isolated in New Zealand, she has no power. She
Hmm.
is trying to be, she is trying to fit in and trying to not be, she's just trying because she's not able to connect. There's no other foxes, there's no other fox spirit. She's alone, and she's alone in these bodies. And each one of these women, I feel, because of that, because they've tried very hard to um, bring their Asian heritage and live their lives the way that they believe they're supposed to. They've been isolated, and those have been the causes of a lot of the trauma. And I think
Hmm.
what you're saying about generational trauma is very true. A lot of that is embedded in filial piety and the way that women are socialized to put themselves last and put the family first, so we're those notions of hungry ghosts. We want, but we must not want more for ourselves. We must only be small and be contained. So, I discovered on the way through that I think if there had been more opportunity for Chinese women to be more connected with Tawi, with other cultures, with more assimilated and understood, then they may have not had these sad stories. It's connectedness that brings us together and makes societies support one another. And so it's that, seeing and seeing someone's experience and having compassion for it and understanding, why would a woman cut her baby in two? What could possibly, and that understanding. And when we see that and we go, oh, then we see a way through and a way to not have that happen again. We need that connectiveness. If you are so isolated and you can't speak the language, and you'll never see your children in China again, and your husband speaks the language and you don't, and you are just can see your life and your daughter's life going forever in this one room, and you can see it getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, maybe that might make you do something drastic. So, it was such an exciting exploration for me. And I was, oh, look, the cover. This cover is just, isn't it stunning?
Gorgeous. Yes,
And
yes.
I'm so grateful to the Cuba Press and also the New Zealand Society of Authors who paid for that, and the Laura Solomon Cuba Press Prize that paid for this beautiful cover, because with the gold stamp and
Oh,
everything. It was actually designed by Christine Ling, and the artwork done by Kim Lowe, and both of them are Asian Kiwis
oh,
as well. So
it's
they,
amazing.
I don't know if you know, but book cover artists don't always read the book. It's rare because
I
they
didn't
don't
know
have
that.
time to read every book that that they're asked to design a cover for.
Sure,
But
sure.
both the designer and the artist read the book and knew they wanted to do something extraordinary, and I think they have. So this the background here, this is Taranaki, I believe, because of the shape of it, which is a little bit
Yes,
like a
yes.
perfect cone, like Fuji. And then this tree, which is well known for Arrowtown in New Zealand, and the lake, which is Lake Taupo, which is the big lake, which is in the middle of the North Island, which is the hook, where the hook of Maui fished up the
Yeah.
country. So that is, you can see that as a very representative of Aotearoa, the land of and you can even see the clouds here, the land of the long white cloud. And then this stylized little fox spirit with her nine tails, she is based on a design that that was found, that I can't say if it was Christine or Kim, found
Yeah.
on a Han Dynasty vase. So they incorporated that, and then also these little feathers you can see, because
Yes.
New Zealand is very well known for its native birds, and there are a
Right.
few mentions of that in the book. So they did something absolutely incredibly powerful, I thought, with the front cover of this book, which is distinctly New Zealand, Kiwi, and also
Yes.
distinctly Asian. So it was very
Yes.
special, and it just to me, I just am so kind of overwhelmed by the cover of this because it speaks so perfectly to the contents. So yeah.
It's beautiful inside and out. It's so amazing, and I love how, like you mentioned, it just reads you. I feel like through and through, both the cover and the inside, right? Like it's everything I think you stand for as an author, as an artist,
Oh, thank
and it's
you.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Monsters are beautiful, aren't they? In that
Yes, they
sort of,
are.
yeah, in the way that they're sort of enlightening and uplifting, and I think there's a lot of hope, isn't there, when you can put something on the page and explore it in that way, and then you can come away with some resolution or some understanding, some compassion. I think there's a lot of hope in monsters, actually.
What hope do they give you?
Well, I mean, I think just representation is incredible. The fact that these stories are out there and they're being seen and heard is hugely hopeful because the more we understand the more we understand something, the less scary it is.
Hmm,
You
definitely.
know, and so we can it might still be big and it might be still out there, but we have encountered it and we understand a little bit more how it might behave, and that gives us hope and gives us solace, doesn't it? Because we will know
Definitely.
what to do the next time, or maybe we won't make that same mistake.
Mhm.
So yeah, I hope so anyway. That's kind of how I see it.
Oh,
So
definitely. No, 100%. And then of course thus you writing about it gives other people hope too. It's wonderful how it works that way. It's a fun game of telephone. I feel I feel like
yeah, and the fox spirit's given me kind of a permission. Again, it's permission to speak, to be my true self, if you like, to kind of be brave about telling stories that have been sort of swept under the carpet. So I was really lucky. There is a book called A Clear Dawn, which is the first book of really the first collection of stories by Asian New Zealanders. Stories and poems and little essays, which was put together by Auckland University Press. Um, and is the editors Paula Morris, who is a Maori New Zealander, and Alison Wong, Chinese New Zealander, and they put together this collection, wonderful collection of stories and poems and what have you by Asian New Zealanders, which was high time. I think it came out in 2020. I'm going
okay,
to
okay.
say, I could be wrong. Um, Wonderful, beautiful volume, and I, of course, got a copy because I wanted to explore who was out there.
Ah,
And there's some
yes.
beautiful writing in there, but I wasn't in it. And I met Alison Wong for the first time at a hui at a literary meeting, and she said she was putting together this book, and at this point it was almost going to press, and she said it's got all the Asian New Zealander writers in it, and I went, oh.
Yeah, right,
um,
right.
and anyway, so it was, in actual fact, it was really about emerging new writers to New Zealand and immigrants and what have you. So I didn't quite fit their brief anyway, but they wanted to mention me. So they very kindly put a sentence about me, something along the lines of Lee Murray is doing some interesting work in speculative and horror, right? Or
Okay,
doing some,
okay.
yeah, like as a voice and, something like that. I can't quite remember the words.
That's
Um,
fine. Yeah.
and as a result, a producer also bought the book, a film producer, and read this, and he happened to be looking for someone who could do some work on a story, which is effectively a fox spirit story. Um, yes. So anyway, so the film had been written. It was written by New Zealand Filmmaker of the Year for last year, Mia Maramara, and
Yes.
also Huiling Owl, who is an acclaimed New Zealand filmmaker and director and playwright, I believe.
Right.
And anyway, so story. So they had written the work originally, and then various things happened. I'm not quite sure what actually happened in the intervening years. I think some, like people move on, different projects. It didn't get,
Sure, sure.
it wasn't being produced at the time, and so they had to do other work. So anyway, by the time the producer came back to me and he read this and discovered me, and he said, you know what, we're going to try and bring this project back to life.
Yes.
And I've got a BAFTA award-winning director on board, Sasha Rainbow. And so, would you like to work with her to bring her vision to the story? And also, I noticed that you are a scientist, and because he'd been to my
Right.
website, and that you are Chinese, and so it was all these kinds of. And you write about monsters, and would you be able to do this? And I said, well, I haven't done a lot of screenwriting at that point. I'd done a little bit, I dabbled, and
Yeah.
I have written a couple of screenplays, prospective screenplays with a colleague, and so I had some experience, but nothing produced.
Right.
Um, and 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 also a short film with another colleague on sort of Asian anxiety, so
Amazing.
for children. Yeah, so that's not produced yet either, but I had been doing some dabbling in some little bit of work there, but I had never had anything produced. And so this was like a like one of those eureka moments. And he said, would I like to come on board? I've said, of course, but I'm fairly new to this. And he said, no worries, because you definitely know how to tell a story. And storytelling is storytelling, and we will
It
get
is.
some mentorship for you. So so the film commission came on board, and they are trying to develop new screenwriters who can tell these cultural stories. um, and so I worked with Sasha to develop the story and to drill down the characters, and to bring sort of a little bit more of my vision to it as well as hers. And but the story effectively is a fox spirit hungry ghost story. So it's about a very a very sort of isolated and othered Asian student who's very bright, who has a disfigurement on the side of her face, and she comes to New Zealand and feeling isolated and strange in this new country, but she's surrounded by these very beautiful young women, um, and she wants to be that. She wants to fit in and belong and be that. So that is essentially the feel of the fox spirit. She has to fit in. She wants to fit in and be her authentic self and get to heaven. And in this story, which is body horror and monstrous, the fox spirit girl takes on the bodies of or the personas of those three beautiful girls. So it's
Oh my
very
gosh.
interesting. Yes, so you'll see it'll come out later this year. It's all finished. I've
Yay.
seen the finished film, which is super scary. My husband was like, oh, we went to the cast and crew screening, and my husband's like, how, oh my gosh, how, it's like hovering in his chair. So a beautiful film. Really, really excited about that. So I was involved with that. So kind of my
Ah,
life has been immersed in this fox spirit um, monster for a few years now, and I'm
right.
loving the opportunities that she's bringing to me to experience,
Yes.
to walk in someone else's shoes, and
Yes.
also see my own experience through it, and be myself, and give me permission to talk about these things. Um, so yeah, so she's allowed me to move more into, the fox spirit has taken me from short stories through
Right.
to, poetry, and now she's and also to films. So she's an essay. So yeah, she's given me this opportunity to speak about my experience, and others like me, in a way that is kind of fresh and new, even though she's a very, ancient monster.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Congratulations, by the way. That's so exciting. Oh my gosh. I bet it's going to be such an amazing work. I'm so excited. That's so exciting. I
Yeah.
just love when monsters take it upon themselves to follow you throughout your life, you know, and be prominent, right? Or come back in very important moments of your life, in very difficult moments of your life.
Yeah.
They appear or they make themselves known in some way. And I think it's so lovely that the fox spirit has been yours, a guide almost, right?
Yeah, in
And I
some
think that's
ways,
great.
yeah. And I mentioned before about trying to sort of put my these monsters into the New Zealand context because I am an
Right,
Asian woman living in New Zealand. So that,
right.
bringing her into New Zealand, that New Zealand context was kind of important to me because this is where my family has settled. And I think, so I have written some other stories that look at that intersection. So,
Right.
in Weird Tales, I have a story called The Good Wife, which kind of explores the difference between the Chinese dragon, which is kind of benevolent and masculine and benevolent and very all giving, and the Maori notion of the taniwha, which is often malevolent and, here be dragons kind of thing. And so,
Right.
but also things like the mines. So in European mining communities in the day, they used square mines. They shored
Right.
up the mines and they were sort of structurally square, right? You walk through a
Right.
square tunnel. But Chinese mines and Chinese miners don't do that because that's where in those squared off spaces is where um, evil spirits roam. And so I was looking at a story which was set in a New Zealand context. And in New Zealand, the miners came along, and the Chinese miners were brought in when the European miners, they allowed the Chinese miners in when the European miners had mined the ore and they couldn't find any more. And
Oh
the
my goodness.
Chinese miners came along and took over those mines and were looking for the dregs, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but already those mines didn't work for them because they were square mines with
Mm-hmm.
evil spirits and
Right.
monsters lurking in the corner. So I'm looking at those kinds of cultural differences and the places where cultures intersect. And
Ah,
so already those miners were very othered. They were they couldn't speak they couldn't speak English. They couldn't speak Maori, a lot of them, and they were isolated and separate and also marginalized because they came out, they had to pay a poll tax, all of those sorts of
mm-hmm.
things. So
Right.
very, very interesting. So I've been using those metaphors in the New Zealand context. Food, that's another one that I've used.
Yes.
The notion of our food is very othering,
Mm.
and in my family there's this idea, there's this kind of unwritten rule that European suitors to will be tested by making them eat chicken's feet, which are phoenix claws, which are a really favourite dish at yum cha at
Right.
breakfast in New
Right.
Zealand in Chinese culture. And so I gave this test to my husband. He doesn't like them.
He didn't pass.
No, he didn't pass. He didn't pass, but he's managed to last for 35 years. So
Oh,
I
I
guess
love
he's,
it.
I guess he's doing okay. But
He
so
is.
I'm trying to explore these notions of, what is a delicacy for one and an important family tradition for one family that isn't for another, and how you fit that in,
Mhm.
and also the sort of racial bias that works the other way. Just because
Oh,
someone
yes.
doesn't eat a chicken's foot doesn't make them racist. Like it's just they don't
Hmm.
they don't like it.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
I've been exploring those other things, those kinds of the monstrous within this Asian context. So it's been, yeah, I'm still enjoying it. I'm
Yes.
still finding places to insert those
Yeah.
explorations, if you like.
It's magnificent. It's exciting, and I'm really thrilled to see kind of where that journey takes you and other stories you explore and other monsters. And I don't know, it's a very exciting time, and I'm excited to see the stories that come of it. I think they'll be great. I think they'll be so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I am too. I've got some mentee. I've got a little mentee in New Zealand who's working on a children's story that
Ah,
brings in, for New Zealand children, that brings in the notion of Chinese and some weird European sort of Lovecraftian type monsters.
yes.
So, but I'm loving that the protagonist is a little, Chinese girl set in a New
Yes.
Zealand small town. And so now there will be coming forward, there's going to be more of these stories where we can see ourselves represented. And I
Mhm.
think that is very special.
So, especially as a child, it's so exciting,
Yeah, you won't have to.
affirming.
Yeah, you won't have to necessarily be the mutant. You can
Yeah.
be you
Yeah.
can be the chosen one who solves the adventure, that solves the
Exactly.
problem and saves the world. Yeah, I why not?
Why
Why
not?
not?
Why can't it end happily for once? I think that's so lovely. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so I know we could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but winding down to our last few questions, Lee, I'm curious, just in general, right, with everything we discussed today, why do you feel that the fox spirit existence is so necessary?
Why is she necessary? I think she exists. I think it's I think she's I think she existed already, so there was nothing I could do about that, right? She
Mm,
is so integral to our understanding of femininity and women's roles,
yeah,
and in society, in Asian society, that she's across all of those, almost all of those cultures. She exists in some form, the fox spirit, deity. Um,
yeah.
but for me, she's so important because I she offers me a lens through which I can find my own authentic self,
Mm,
and uncover the stories of women who weren't able to speak for themselves. But also, she's she's evolving. She's always reinventing herself and evolving. And as a writer, that's something that I would like to do: is always be better, and you know, and make my writing stronger and speak to more people and talk about the important things. So I'm always trying to reinvent myself. I didn't start out as a poet, but I
right.
am now. So it's not just the stories I'm telling, but it's the way I'm telling them through,
Hmm.
fiction, poetry, screenwriting. These,
Yes.
how am I telling these stories? So for me, it's a way of sort of subverting. She's always a way. She always offers me a new lens through which to look at things, and so I'm very grateful to the Fox Spirit because she's important. She existed before. She is not mine. She's and but also women are changing. Women are gaining more agency. We are
Hmm.
speaking our minds. We are uh, giving ourselves permission to be angry. I mean, look at
Hmm.
the Netflix series Beef.
Right.
uh, um,
Yes.
we are
Yes.
giving ourselves other parallel lives. Look at, everything everywhere all at once.
Yes.
You can have all of these possible lives, and that is kind of a fox spirit type of approach, isn't it?
It is.
And so for me, she just gives us so much power to reinvent ourselves, remake ourselves, find our true authentic self. And that could be any number of different passages or pathways or journeys to the heavens. And I love that aspect of her. So although I didn't create her, she's bringing some creation to me. She's giving me permission to create in different and innovative ways, and I'm so grateful to her for that.
That's beautiful. You're absolutely right. I love how you said too, she's always existed and she always will. She'll always be. But it's so beautiful that you get to see that snippet of her life, right? And you get to create those stories and explore her creatively, use her as a lens. I don't know. That's so exciting. And I love that she's become so much a part of you and your work. That's really, really thrilling. It
Yes,
truly is.
that shape-shifting thing, which I don't know
Yeah,
which form she might take. That
right.
is the exciting thing. Yeah, no, I'm very, very grateful to her and for the sisterhood that's kind of formed around me and the response from readers. That is the big thing. I mean, it's all very well speaking our truth, but if no one hears it, no one reads
Mm,
it, then it's
mm,
who are we talking to? Nobody. So
sure.
I would love to see it get broader readership, not just for the people that it speaks to, but
Right.
that universality, because I think it speaks to the human condition. I think
Hmm.
these are the kinds of stories that say these are our experiences as immigrants, but other people feel these things too. You know, um, we're all, children of the world, and so we're all trying to live in this space and
Mm,
move forward and be our best selves. And so I'm
hmm.
hoping that these monsters give us access and understanding to the people around us that whose lives don't look like ours.
100%. That's exactly what they do. That's exactly what they do. Well, this is a bit of a complicated question, but I think it'll be an easy one for you. Um, do you believe that the fox spirit is a monster? Why or why not?
I don't think she is for me. I think she's a
Yeah,
friend. I think she's become my friend. Um, and we have monsters that become our friends. I think that for many people she's still a monster. But for
yeah,
me she's become a friend and a helpmate and a companion.
yeah. Ah, that's amazing. I love that. I love that it's transformed that relationship so much. That's great. Okay, well, unfortunately, we are at our last question,
I
Lee,
don't think I've
and
answered any of the questions
yes,
that
you
you've got
have.
on this list.
No, you 100% have. And I'm so excited. I think you brought up so many other different things to talk about and perspectives and so many avenues of your work to touch on. I mean, like I said, we could talk about this stuff all day, but I'm curious. This is a bit of a silly question, but it's one of my favorite questions. Say, today, July 1st, right? You're just relaxing. Perhaps your husband is building your book shelves. I don't know. It's just a really lovely
I
day.
hope he does. I hope he does,
Right,
but it's
right,
Monday, so
exactly.
probably not.
Right, definitely. Um, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the fox spirit appears to you. What do you think you would do in that situation, or what do you think you would say?
She appears to me as a fox or in some form.
Yeah, yeah, completely up
Yeah,
to you.
she appears to me. I don't know. Maybe we'll go and have tea.
Yes.
Maybe we'll go and have yum tar, or I don't know. What would I do if she appeared? I mean, to be honest, I think she appears to me almost every day because I'm working with her, and
Yeah.
so I say she's become a friend, but she has become kind of top of mind. So,
Mm,
um, if she appeared in her actual form, I think um, I would go and have tea with her and sit with
mm,
her and hear her story, her own story,
yeah.
her own story, maybe.
Yeah.
That's yeah. But I do feel she sits with me a lot
Yeah.
anyway because I've been working with her so intimately and over the last few
Mm,
years. But yeah, maybe just that to sit outside in the sun and have a cup of tea and to talk, yeah, and to hear her story.
that's beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I feel like that's very in character of you to be so kind to her and want to hear her story for once. Um, right? Maybe not just I don't know. I think that it's beautiful. I love that you have her with you always. It says a lot. It says a
Oh,
lot about you.
thank you. Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. I feel very lucky to have had the opportunities that I have, and through the Fox Spirit and through the sisterhood, and because because I've been born here, and I've
Yeah.
seen a gap where there hasn't been, the stories haven't been told, and so I've been very
Mhm.
lucky to be given the gift of those stories to bring to the world, and
Yeah.
not every story obviously is mine to tell, but I feel
Sure.
like this is an opportunity to open a dialogue around stories that haven't been told before. So I've
Definitely.
been very lucky.
And we're very lucky to read your work. So thank you for doing it, truly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for being here. It was such an amazing conversation. I love hearing about your origins and kind of your work and where it's going to be and where it's going to grow. So thank you so much for doing this. It was
Oh,
fantastic.
look, thank you for having me, Camilla. It's been lovely to chat with you, and thank you for your great questions that I didn't answer a single one of. But
Yes, you did. I promise. I promise. I promise. This episode of Floaties for Krakens was written and recorded by me, Camille Maria Acosta. A monstrous thank you to Lee Murray for such a genuine interview. A big thank you to Michael Kosman for producing a stellar episode, and a huge thank you to Natalie Hedberg for designing such a phenomenal logo. And music for the show was written and produced by me, with a special appearance by my tata, Toby Acosta. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's show. It truly means the world to me. If you have questions or curiosities about the research or media referenced in today's episode, everything will hopefully be in the description box. And you can find us at our website and our socials, links in the description as well. Anyway, thanks again for being here, everybody. And just a reminder, it's okay to be afraid of the monster, but it's also okay to love the heck out of it too. Keep being monstrous and keep shining bright.